On April 22nd, Pahalgam, a famous tourist destination in Kashmir, witnessed a horrifying act of terror. This wasn't a random shooting, it was a premeditated massacre where Hindu men were specifically targeted and gunned down in front of their families. A survivor later confessed that he only managed to escape by reciting the Kalma and posing as a Muslim. The intent behind the attack was clear. It was driven by religious hatred sanctioned by Islamic scriptures. The country responded with shock and outrage. The government condemned the attack, vowing that the perpetrators and their handlers would be hunted down, no matter where they were. Political parties, regardless of their ideologies, largely stood united in grief and condemnation. Even Arab nations expressed their condolences and solidarity. But it was Israel and the United States that called a spade, openly labeling it as an Islamic terror attack. Even Asaduddin Owaisi, a rather extremist Muslim political leader, subtly acknowledged the religious nature of the attack. Yet, despite the clarity of the incident and its motivations, the global media once again exposed their biases. The New York Times ran the headline, quote, "At least 24 tourists gunned down by militants in Kashmir," end quote. Not terrorists, not jihadists, just militants. Their report conveniently stripped the event of its religious motivations. The Washington Post wasn't far behind, writing, quote, "Gunmen kill and wound tourists in India-administered Kashmir," end quote, as if it were some random shooting incident. And CNN, rather than focusing on the victims, decided to use the opportunity to bring up the Modi government's revocation of Article 370, as if that somehow explained or justified what happened. What's even more disturbing is that these articles were co-written by Indian journalists who live in Delhi, who know the ground reality, and who still choose to whitewash an act of terror. They subtly questioned India's claim over Jammu and Kashmir, softened the language around the attackers, and made it seem like a random act of violence, not a pre-planned assault on Hindus. After the BBC ran a headline calling it a militant attack, the Ministry of External Affairs wrote a strongly worded letter to the BBC India chief. The Home Ministry also banned 16 Pakistani YouTube channels spreading anti-India propaganda. But the problem isn't limited to foreign media. Take a look at our own, the Indian Express and the Hindu. On April 23rd, the day after the attack, their coverage made no mention of the religious angle. Their editorials were silent on the hate that fueled the killings. The same Indian Express that once ran the outrageous headline, "And they hanged Yaqub," referring to Yaqub Memon, convicted for the 1993 Bombay blasts, now couldn't muster a single sentence acknowledging that 25 Hindus were killed for being Hindu. The Hindu's editorial on April 24th was even more evasive. Instead of addressing the victims' religious identity, it spoke about the regions they hailed from, neatly sidestepping the obvious. Later, the Indian Express was more concerned about the impact on tourism than the lives lost. The editorial shamelessly said, "Nothing can compensate those who lost their lives," only to follow it up with, "The best tribute would be providing a fear-free environment for the people of Jammu and Kashmir." So apparently, local livelihoods are more important than confronting religiously motivated terror. Meanwhile, primetime news channels reduced the tragedy to shouting matches. Pakistani panelists were invited to spew venom. Indian panelists screamed back. Audiences clapped. Everyone got their TV moment. But the seriousness of the tragedy and its implication for Hindu society, all that was lost in the noise. And then came the ultimate low. India Today inviting Abdul Basit, former Pakistani ambassador to India, a man who once boasted about influencing Indian columnist Shobha Dey to write in favor of a plebiscite in Kashmir after terrorist Burhan Wani was killed. Rajdeep Sardesai defended the move, tweeting that it was important to know the views of the Pakistani establishment. But what exactly did we gain from platforming a man who proudly manipulated Indian media? What's being exposed is not Pakistan's duplicity. That's a given. It's the tragic state of Indian media. A media ecosystem where established outlets seem more interested in TRP than truth, more eager to appear politically correct than to be honest. We could have had some hope if social media had stepped in after the Pahalgam terror attack to offer a sensitive and truthful perspective. But that didn't happen either. Social media, which is open to everyone, often ends up spreading random and shallow reactions. Instead of fixing the false stories told by mainstream media, it mostly adds noise and turns reality into a joke. It rubs salt, as it were, to a festering wound. At the end of the day, this isn't about just one incident. This is about what we choose to see and what we choose to ignore. This is about having the courage and the spine to face reality at its most terrifying and standing up for dharma against all odds.